I recently spoke with Edward Snowden, a military contractor who revealed government secrets and now lives in exile. Did Snowden do the right thing? After researching this, I now think he did. You decide.
In private, right? When you're not in email, when they're just speaking heart to heart about this, they go, no, this is crazy. I'm not sure why we're doing this. I'm not sure how we're doing this. I'm not sure this is legal. But you know what happens to people who talk about this, right? I wouldn't put this in writing. I wouldn't go, to this office or that office. They're not going to do anything about it. It's not your job. It's not my job. This is way above our pay level, basically. But what happens to us as an organization at the NSA? What happens to us as Americans? What happens to us as a society if everybody sees something wrong and goes, well, if I say something about it, I'm going to get into trouble? What happens if everybody goes, I'm not going to do anything about this because it's not my job? That's how things go wrong in a much more serious way. And the reality was I was just like them. For a long time, I had a growing sense of unease. But in reality, it was not my job to fix it. And this was actually one of the criticisms that was eventually leveled against me, was they go, who elected you? But it's not about, who you are. It's about what you've witnessed. It's about what you can prove. And does that matter? And I think the last 7 years, when we've seen the courts review these programs and confirm that they were, in fact, unlawful, we've seen laws changed even by the legislature that was implicated in the wrongdoing in the first place.
But at some point, you decided, I'm not going to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly because of this. If I keep my mouth shut, the guy to my right, the guy to my left, we all think this is wrong, and we all keep our mouths shut. What does tomorrow look like? And the year after that, and the year after that? The reality with these kind of extraordinary powers in government, particularly we all understand this now in the post 9/11 moment, because it's not just surveillance. It's happened in war. It's happened in international diplomacy. It's happened in economy with the financial crisis, how we bail out the banks, but we don't bail out ordinary people. When the government writ large identifies a moment of crisis, they use that crisis for an exceptional demand for exceptional powers to which they normally wouldn't be entitled. This was the rise of the Patriot Act, right? This was how the Bush administration got involved in more or less wiretapping. This is how we got extrajudicial killings through drone strikes off the ground. This is how we got involved in torture. But it's always justified as, an exception to ordinary operations, something that's done for a narrow purpose in a narrow way, but then nobody objects to it. These all happen in secret, remember. They keep the body of witnesses small by design to limit the amount of dissent that can occur internally, organizationally. And those who do complain are generally shuffled off the program. They're put in a closet somewhere, and they ride out their days to retirement if they're lucky, never doing anything that matters again, but also not having access to anything that could cause problems for those who are violating people's rights or our laws. But this, as you said, why speak up? If you sit by and see a system engaged in wrongdoing, and you do nothing, even if you don't participate in it any longer, even if you resign, you are perpetuating a system of wrongdoing. You have become not just part of the wrongdoing, but party to it. And for me, when we looked at this, this was affecting the country that I love. This was affecting the internet that I grew up with, which was practically part of my family by this point in my life. And then you extrapolate from how we got involved in sort of this overreaching surveillance state to begin with, the national security state, and step by step, bit by bit, exception after exception, these extraordinary and narrow authorities become permanent and perpetual authorities. And bit by bit, as the domain of government expands, the territory that is claimed to the people narrows. And this became such a concern to me that I was willing to risk a great deal to tell people about it and see if they agreed or if I was just crazy.
My preference, and I think the American people's preference, would have been for a lawful, orderly examination of these laws, a thoughtful, fact-based debate that would then lead us to a better place. There were other avenues available for somebody whose conscience was stirred and thought that they needed to question government actions.
So why go to certain members of the media? President Obama later said there were other avenues available for someone whose conscience was stirred. Inspector generals, Congress.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a great kind of question. I mean, we always look at these things. We don't want anybody in government to be able to go out and, throw any secret about anything out on the media willy-nilly. And this is one of the primary institutional criticisms against me. On the other hand, are there internal channels, as Obama posited? For me, no. Even under the most generous reading of the law at the time, what he said was incorrect. And he said so at a time that, by the way, he knew it was incorrect, even though it was politically useful, because this had been debated in newspapers around the country by this point. I was not an employee of the NSA. I was employed at a private company that was contracted to do work for the NSA at NSA buildings, on NSA equipment. The only difference between myself and the actual NSA employee sitting to my right in the office was he had a blue badge. I had a green badge. Green was for contractor, blue was for staff employee of government. But the whistleblower protection laws did not apply to contractors. This makes sense if you think about it in the context of the moment, because how can the government protect someone from complaints when it's not actually their employee, right? How can the government prevent someone from being disciplined when they're a private company for whatever purpose? And the reality is even if I had gone through an internal process, had I gone to Congress, had I gone to the president himself, the ultimate result would have been the same. I would have been stopped at some level by an individual like the NSA Inspector General, who is supposed to be kind of a watchdog that makes sure the NSA's activities are legally compliant, or the Office of General Counsel. I would have been terminated from my position. I would have been investigated by the police, and I very likely would have been charged under exactly the same laws that I've been charged under today. We know this, not because I'm speculating and throwing this out of air, but because it had happened before in the case of a former NSA executive at a much higher level than myself, by the name of Thomas Drake, who did go through proper channels and whose story I was very familiar with, because I was determining, should I do this? Is it right? Will it work? Will it be effective? William Binney, who was charged with Thomas Drake at the same time, or investigated at the same time as Thomas Drake for the same disclosure.
He had men with guns drawn come into his house at dawn.
Yes, exactly. You had the FBI burst into your house. They take all your computers. They arrest you. They interrogate you. You lose your clearance. You lose your job.
First, I went to the House Intelligence Committee, and the staff member that I personally knew there, and she then went to the chairman of that committee. We were all trying to work internally in the government over these years, trying to get them to come around to being constitutionally acceptable and take it into the courts and have the courts oversight of it too. We naively kept thinking that could happen, and it never did. They decided to raid us, to keep us quiet, threaten us, In my case, they came in with guns drawn. I don't know why they did that, but they did.
Thomas Drake, who was an executive at the top of the U.S. intelligence community, now works at an Apple store, right? But it's important to understand that he did go through proper channels. He did everything right. And when he went to these officials, this is what they said. This is the Office of General Counsel at the NSA, a man by the name of Vito Potenza.
If he came to me, someone who was not read into the program, and told me that we were running amok, essentially, and violating the Constitution, there's no doubt in my mind I would have told him, go talk to your management. Don't bother me with this. I mean, the minute he said, if he did say, you're using this to violate the Constitution, I probably would have stopped the conversation at that point, quite frankly. So, I mean, if that's what he said, then anything after that I probably wasn't listening to anyway.
And this is the reality, and I think everybody understands this naturally. These internal watchdog shops in government, they're great if you need to report sexual harassment. They're great if you need to report some kind of discrimination, if somebody's stealing office supplies. If you go, the entire agency of government is engaged in a conspiracy to deceive the public about the reality that we are right now working in concert across agencies to carry out a program that is in violation not only of law but the Constitution. They're not equipped to handle that, and they're not interested in investigating that. That's not why they were appointed.
Why do you think you were charged under the Espionage Act? That's pretty rare.
To send a chilling message.
To whom?
To other whistleblowers, to others in the government, not to speak out or speak out. Do not tell truth to power. We'll hammer you.